Welcome back to the Sounds of the Baskerville. I'm James Flaherty. I head up the Insolve panel, and I've got, of course, joining me again, Chris Baskerville, managing partner of Brisbane for Jersh Sutherland.
I should always wait for the introduction, then say good morning, shouldn't I?
Oh, it's always
good morning,
nice to
James.
be friendly, isn't it? So, and speaking about friends, here we are with Patrick Coghlan again. Thanks for joining us again, Patrick.
Great to be here. Thank you.
So, the Creditor Watch story was that there used to be this thing that if you had a default registered on a file, that would be, what's that word you use, Chris? Indicia? Indicia of a 50% likelihood of that particular company going into some type of administration within 18 months.
Yeah.
Is that sort of what it is? And does that still hold true, do you think? From what you see,
yeah, definitely. It's a really powerful indicator. So just to make it clear what it is. So
yeah, that's good. Thank you.
If you're a creditor, you're a supplier to another business. You issue an invoice, they don't pay it, it's overdue. Just for Creditor Watch, it's got to be overdue and over $100. The creditor, the supplier, provided they use Creditor Watch, can register a default against that debtor. And that leaves a black mark against that debtor's credit file. And that does two things. Anyone who looks at that credit report in the future will see that they haven't paid a bill. It'll have the date, the amount, and who they owe. And anyone who is monitoring that particular debtor at the time the default is registered will receive an email alert to say a default has been registered against this company. So it's certainly a precursor to insolvency. And we talk about a debtor's journey to insolvency. What we usually see is they slow their payments. Defaults are registered by generally smaller creditors, non-critical creditors, and then you see sort of court action winding up administration. That's the sort of perfect world. Doesn't always work that way. So what we've seen when we've done our research is that there's a 50% chance of a company failing within 18 months when a default is registered against it. So it's a really powerful tool, one, for collection, right? If you're the supplier, and two, if you are supplying to that company or thinking about it, you probably should think twice.
Yeah, you've got to have a really good reason to engage if someone's got one of those on it, because you've got like a little speedo type thing.
So that then affects the credit rating and downgrades them, and all of a sudden we talk about probability of default. That is the chance of that company failing within the next 12 months.
And that holds true. That's pretty much holds true.
Yeah, we've got a very, very much smarter team who looks after the data and analytics than me, and they're crunching the numbers on a regular basis. It wasn't sort of just a one-off. It's they're reviewing that on a monthly basis. We've obviously got to make sure we get it right, but we also want to make sure we're improving on it and gathering more data in. So it's not just the defaults, but in this case, yeah, it's if you see a default on a credit file, it's a high risk business that you're either dealing with or thinking of dealing with.
Right. Okay. So then Chris's ears prick up because he goes, okay, well then there's an opportunity of some more things for me to be helping restructure. Is that what you're saying, Chris?
And we should be looking at the default. Is these default rates published anywhere, Patrick?
Yeah.
Oh, good.
They are. So monthly business risk index, we will show the number for the month, and we sort of look back. Probably, I try to look back pre-COVID, so at least we get a normalization.
Yeah, I got it.
To then, but yeah, we can see that they're going up at the moment, which shouldn't be a surprise.
Question without notice: any particular regions that you're seeing any stats kind of?
Yep. So the worst or the highest risk regions at the moment are Western Sydney. There's sort of 3 or 4 council areas, or we call it SA2, SA3 sort of geographic measurement areas. Western Sydney and Gold Coast, Coolangatta, and those 2 regions primarily have been the worst for sort of 18 months now, for different reasons.
Yeah, there's an old expression we used to say, and this is just after the GFC, but the Gold Coast as an example, always the first to boom and the first to bust. So we watch what happens on the Gold Coast, and if you see that crashing, then you go, right, it's obviously coming.
Yeah, that's the barometer. So that's the barometer and backed up by the science.
Canary in the
coal mine. Yeah. And then so in industries, we've talked about sort of building construction, hospitality. Is that
so in order at the moment is is hospitality. So, and anyone dealing with, restaurants, bars, accommodation, etc. That's regularly top 3 historically. So they're number 1 on our probability of default by industry. Number 2 is transport, postal, and warehousing. And then number 3 is arts and recreation. So obviously 1 and 3, very, very risky generally, but typically they are discretionary spending industries, and hopefully everyone out there is spending less. So inflation comes down. Come on, guys, do your bit. And then transport, post, and warehousing. There's sort of two big reasons there. One is the costs, energy costs, fuel costs. Less people buying through the likes of Afterpay and whatnot. Right? We've seen e-commerce come down, but then also there's supply chain issues within there as well. So that's hampering that industry.
So in the pandemic, we all ordered new cars, but of course they weren't coming because the manufacturing wasn't there. And so we had to order them about 18 months in advance. And it was like this last quarter that they were reporting on. Finally, the cars turn up. So a lot of the trade, surplus for Australia was made up of all of these machinery items we've had on back order for 1.5 years. Yeah.
Now, listening to the Treasurer recently, he was feeling that he felt that the inflation dragon may have been slayed. So maybe the RBA, we might be looking towards the end of the increases in interest rates.
It's not good for anyone, but it's probably what Australia needs to get back to a normal, non-synthetic trading environment, if that makes sense, right? There was JobKeeper, JobSeeker,
JobMaker,
Safe Harbour, all of these things. The banks went slow, the ATO went slow, and in hindsight, it's easy to pick it to pieces, but let's get on with it, right? But that created the environment that we're in today, both from a trading perspective and inflation perspective. So I think what we're going to see is this huge number of people come off fixed rate, and I think the number you said was 800,000 still to go. Majority of them, I'm pretty sure, are in the second half of the year. So hopefully they're not all out having avocado on toast at the moment. And what we're going to see, I think, is the ATO will continue to work really collaboratively with business. Except if you put your head in the sand and refuse to answer them, then they will register a default against you and they will put you into administration, wind you up.
Well, actually, just on those 2 points, I think this is relevant. In the pandemic years, if you wanted 10 years to pay your tax debts, you could get it. If you wanted 5 years to pay your tax debts, you could get it. Because a lot of the workforce in the ATO was moved to job keeper, which is, and so what they were not doing is the enforcement element.
Yeah.
But now there's a change of tune. A lot of the accountants I'm talking to is the ATO is now coming to firm up their position now. So they're not being as negotiable as they was, but they've also registering the defaults over 100 grand and over 90 days.
Yeah.
Are you starting to see that in the reporting and how that's impacting the risk scores?
Yeah, so we're certainly, it was a great initiative. I think it was called the Tax Disclosure Act, something like that. I've definitely butchered that. I'll get a call from the ATO later on for getting that wrong. But essentially, and you would have seen this, for far too long, businesses would get wound up by the ATO owing millions of dollars, and all the other creditors would go, oh, what? They were paying us fine. If we knew that they owed millions of dollars, we wouldn't have, given them credit limits of X. So it was actually good that the ATO can now register defaults against businesses that owe significant amounts of money to the ATO. So that's still in a ramp process or stage for the ATO, but it's really good quality information to know that, hey, this business is not only owes the ATO money, but is not doing anything about it. Whereas if you answer a call from the ATO, speak to them, they're essentially not going to register a default against you. They are being collaborative, but not allowed, not maybe not the 5 and 10 years that we saw, but definitely more collaborative than 2019 and backwards. So, and
I should have said that those that don't engage with the ATO, that's one of the other tick boxes. Yep, this is going to the credit file.
Really important. No engagement, not on a payment plan or anything like that. So you're just not answering the phone calls, not answering emails, not making payments. you're going to get a default registered against you. So that's really important data that's coming through. Not huge volumes just yet, but that will certainly build and form a really important part of assessing a company for credit risk.
See, the issue in Australia is only large companies and ASX listed companies report your financial position, right? So you report your earnings, your balance sheets, your cash flows. If you're not large, you don't have to report.
And it's even less than it was only a couple of years ago.
Yeah. Oh, so you're saying the reporting entities are shrinking?
Yeah.
Makes sense. But take a country like Switzerland as an example. They get everyone to disclose their financials. So in other words,
public record, isn't it?
Yeah. So even the small, milk shop down the road or the barber and the hairdresser, you're disclosing your financials. Like, how easy would it be for us to do business with people and understand your customer if everyone just had to disclose your financials?
Yeah. If everyone had to do it, it'd be great. We often get international companies that come over from Europe or the US or wherever, and they say, "Oh, can we get a sample report?" And we provide the sample report, and they go, "Well, where are the financials?" And we go, "Oh, okay. Well, let's go to school here. Unless you are, $100 million turnover or more in your consolidated, entity group, you don't have to report." And they're like, "How does anyone do business here?" It's like, everyone's pretty good in Australia.
Just a handshake. Trust me.
We shake our hand. And, we pay our bills. So there's a small percentage of companies that go into administration every year.
Two things that sort of somewhat predate or survived the pandemic years, though, were safe harbour is a defence for directors where they can sort of build a defence for insolvent trading, can't they, Chris, and say, well, you could
actually,
talk
there's a few things safe harbour can defend you against, but the number one is insolvent trading.
The other thing is these small business reconstructions. So we our first podcast of the year, wasn't it, Chris, was to go through the ASIC report, and most of the time it was the ATO was either one of one or two only creditors, and most of the time they were owed most of the money.
Correct.
So that's consistent with what you're saying, is that people kind of look after everybody else first, and then pay the tax man last.
They're the biggest bank in Australia, right?
Yeah, and they know it. They know they are the financier of first choice.
Yep.
And so
cheapest.
And so that's and then what Chris and his colleagues in his industry really enjoyed about it is they get to go walk in the director's shoes. They get to be, rather than pulling the thing to bits, they're actually trying to help hold the thing together, strip it off, negotiate a really good outcome. What have you seen in terms of, and I'll preface this with, we were working with a particular organisation that wanted to go through this small business reconstruction with the tax office, and MYOB turned off their payments mechanism. And we went to them and said, "Hang on, this is designed to help support you." But there's perhaps is there a misunderstanding from some people about what this thing even is?
Without a doubt.
Yeah, gotcha.
Yeah, so it was obviously talked about with great fanfare, and then it went live, and like nothing happened for months and months and months. You could count on one hand or two hands maybe, and it's probably not that many more. So it obviously took a long time to be embraced, and I think that's just getting back to that normal sort of trading environment. I think there's a bit of a cottage industry that's, I think, popped up around it, where advisors, small business advisors, are saying, "Hey, let me negotiate with the tax office. You owe $1 million, $2 million, whatever it is. I'll get 10 cents in the dollar. That you'll only have to pay 10 cents in the dollar via this SBR, and then you can trade again." It's a great way to just not pay the tax office. And business owners are going, "Sounds like a no-brainer," and they do it. And then what happens is they can't get credit. They can't access payments, because when I talk to credit managers of particularly larger, sophisticated organisations, they go, anyone who's gone through what is an insolvency event, we're not going to provide credit to. So, and that's not everyone who's going through SBR. Like it's definitely there for the right reasons as well. But unfortunately, where there's holes to be picked in something, there's holes being picked. So that's one of the sort of downsides. And I think there are some directors out there that I've spoken to that have gone through it and now can't get credit anywhere. Yes, they didn't have to pay the ATO much, but they now can't get credit anywhere else. And that's, virtually impossible to do business without that. aside from that sort of niche, there's certainly easier for smaller businesses to get assistance and hopefully trade out of it. Don't know the stats, Chris. I don't know how many are actually, coming back to life after they've gone through that process.
Yeah, I think the ASIC report we were talking about had a very high success rate. So in other words, nearly over 90%.
Great,
So in other words, 90% of small business owners that went and said, here's my plan, I'm still trading the business, we've still got employment, 90% got up.
Great, okay.
I like that.
And that's what it was designed for.
Correct.
And it's affordable. I think that was the other thing.
Correct. But I think why was there no real uptake as soon as it came out is education. Who's trained, even us in the industry, we're trying to read the black letter law going, how the hell does this work?
Where are the cheat sheets to understand this quickly so I can communicate to a client?
And also explaining the benefits. When you explain a feature, you got to explain a benefit. Classic sales 101.
Yeah.
How can we explain? I can explain the feature. What's the benefit? Not too sure actually. Yeah. Now, as we're starting to see it come to life, we're now educating the advisors now, like the accountants, and the accountants are then saying, great, now I know how this can save my clients. And so we're seeing a 600% increase in small business restructuring because now we're starting to understand the benefits.
One of the things that also came out of that report was it was trying to understand how many of those plans were still going. It was so that's a bit of that longitudinal stuff, is how many of them actually get to actually pay the amount back that they said that they would. That's another bit that's still.
And I think that goes to the education piece. If we could get some stats or a report on that from ASIC, that'd be really good.
So I think if I hear what you're saying, if someone says to you, hey, this SBR is a way of getting X cents in the dollar.
Yeah.
If you look at it cold hard, and if you look at the people that you work with every day in credit and risk, you need to understand there are some downsides.
Yeah, definitely. Anytime that you go through, anything to do with insolvency or you think you are trading insolvent, you should be getting expert advice.
Indeed.
So who is that expert? Is it a liquidator, administrator? Is it an accountant? Accountants.
Lawyer,
etc. And don't be afraid to speak to multiple people. And ASIC, they're really helpful as well.
There's a lot of information out there, ASIC's website and industry bodies that we're a part of. Heaps of information
there's so much. So don't just listen to a single person who says you might save some money here on your tax debt.
Yeah, barbecues or pay some. I've been bankrupt myself, so I know how it'll work.
I've done my own research.
I've been bankrupted 3 times, so I know how to advise on corporate liquidation.
Yeah.
Really? Is that the issue?
So there's definitely a space for it. I don't want to sort of fearmonger, but there's some downside to it as well, which is then you've just got to prove that you've got a good business and you're trading and work up from maybe the small credit account that you get, the credit limit that you get, and build back up. And
that viability was one of the 3 unwritten things in SBR, which is the business viable? Is it a better outcome than liquidation? And is there a catastrophic or an extraordinary event that explains why the company is in the situation that it is,
Yeah.
And as long as you've got those 3 things there, your success rate is high.
Yeah, I think the success is good. And as I say, that it's a real combination between people we talked about previously. How many businesses now that are going into administration or liquidation perhaps should have already. SBR isn't maybe what we're saying, the easy off-ramp that you think it might be for somebody who actually doesn't really have a business really anyway. But so don't be told by Barry at the barbecue that this is 10 cents on the dollar, it should be right.
I might just address the you were talking about that. Okay, so we go through an SBR, which is great. We've saved some money on our balance sheet, right? Debts that we're not having to pay back, but we lose the ability to get some finance. And again, coming back to education. If the financier understood that a successful SBR recalibrates your balance sheet in favour of the business viability, you've actually now got room to a provision to get some capital to grow or expand, And if people understood that.
Yeah, there's a real need for a narrative off the back of it, because I think at the moment, creditors or potential creditors just go, nope, there's an insolvency event.
Yeah, well, that's it.
Automatic reject,
yeah, correct.
Right? Whereas you're going to have to work hard to win the trust of a potential supplier.
So that's a bit of what your own research does. It's also probably your industry groups too, Chris. is around that education, because as we've often said, often it's the only creditor is the tax office.
Yes.
So they've done all the right things with all the people who were the creditors from day to day. The business as usual crew were all being paid.
Yeah.
So that's the they just couldn't pay the perhaps most important creditor of all in the industry.
Which again, like, just because it's the ATO doesn't make it okay.
It's definitely
right?
okay. Yeah,
a creditor goes, well, what's to stop this from happening again? And you go back to the ATO to negotiate again. There's no way the ATO is giving you a second go. And then what comes after that?
Yeah,
So
because it's a
that's the
7-year.
thinking.
You can't do it. It's 7-year.
Oh, you got one shot at it. Yeah, basically we say you got one shot.
And I think that goes back to your 3 golden rules, doesn't it, Chris? The 3 golden rules that you talked about before. The last one is that there's got to be a reason, sure.
Yeah.
It's
And
not
a
just-
real reason, not
You know, COVID, bushfires, floods, you know, they're the usual at the moment. Like, and if we can see that narrative matched in the financials, we go, yeah, that makes sense.
And
If it's just simply, I've just racked up, $900,000 worth of tax out and I just don't want to pay it, I don't know if that's an extraordinary reason why.
And you had one that had bushfires, floods, and COVID, and $1 million worth of tax debt. It was
and lockdowns where their capital machinery and manpower was locked down in between Queensland and New South Wales. Like, I literally couldn't get across the border.
Yeah.
So
So that's the past. Let's look at the future.
Yeah.
So anyway, so we're hoping the RBA will stop jacking us up
Strangling everyone.
areas. We see the usual, in some ways, the usual suspects: the pressure points in hospitality, building, transport. So it's a question of sort of run lean, run smart. You'll continue to see restaurants where you've got to order your lunch from the Q scan.
I'm a fan
things,
of that. I actually
QR
don't mind
code.
that. Yeah.
You don't have to talk to people.
I can't stand it, but
Yeah,
that's for another session.
I wouldn't do that if I'm going high-end white tablecloth restaurant. No way. I want the proper service.
Yeah.
Make me feel good.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
in terms of your pubs, no problem.
Works well.
Bang, bang,
Works well.
So let's see what the future holds. Okay. Thanks, gentlemen. That's been great.
Thanks, James. Thanks, Patrick.
Thanks, James. Thanks for having me, guys. That was great.